Hi everyone, take two. I was on earlier, but no one could hear me, which was great. So hi everyone, and thank you so much to Sales Confidence as well for having me. So like Jack said, I'm a founding SDR at FeedStock, which has meant that I've had to start from scratch. Unfortunately, I've not had any best practices that I've been able to replicate. So in just a few months, I've had to take on a lot of learning, a lot of trial and error. And that's exactly why I'm going to be talking about different approaches to learning, and the different approaches is really, really key. So this really matters because without recognizing the factors that affect the way we learn, we're actually unable to take advantage of them and play them to our strengths. And as we all know, in sales, time is money. So it's really key to be effective in your learning to a point where you're successfully absorbing the optimal amount of information in a good, reasonable amount of time. I'm just conscious, can everybody hear me? Can you just let me know in the chat, please? Okay, perfect. So there are 5 main points that I do want to cover. And some of them may seem really obvious or really basic, but I think they are often overlooked because a lot of the time when we do think of learning, let's be honest, we all think about a tedious online course or a really text-dense book. But in reality, there are so many other approaches nowadays. And that brings me on to my first point, which is learning channels. So as mentioned, we are so fortunate nowadays to have so many platforms from which we can learn. So we're thankfully not just confined to books and the World Wide Web. But I don't think we actually exploit these channels enough, especially things like podcasts and YouTube videos, which are actually way easier to access than traditional learning methods. You can just go online, find them instead of having to go to a library or buying a book. It's just a lot easier. So for me, I've actually been finding it really useful to run videos in the background when I'm not talking to clients, of course, and actually listening to them as I work. So for me, this just feels a lot less intense, but has been so effective. But do whatever suits you best, which actually brings me to my next point, which is learning styles. So it's really important to recognize how you learn, and everybody is going to be completely different. And there's actually a statistic that people remember only 20% of what they read, but 80% of what they see. And there is a lot of controversy around these statistics because there are so many variables that come into play. And whilst these are very generalized statistics, different individuals will find different levels of effectiveness with each method. And it can be really easy to get lost and feel like you're doing the wrong thing, especially when your peers might be doing something completely different, and also when there's a larger, more generalized cohort of SDRs. So do be mindful that what your peers may be finding effective may not actually be the best route for you. So be in tune with yourself and how your brain works. So thirdly, time allocation. There's actually a Japanese term called Kaizen. I don't know if you guys have heard of it before. Let me know in the chat if you've heard of Kaizen. But it means small continuous improvements. And I think that it's really, really relevant for learning. So learning is definitely a process, and things are not going to happen overnight as much as we would love them to. So don't overwhelm yourself to the point where, learning becomes a chore. Instead, it's actually way more effective and also manageable to make small incremental changes. For example, reading 30 minutes before you go to bed, or listening to a video in the background, like what I do. And this is something that can be continued on a long-term basis instead of bombarding yourself, getting fed up and getting burned out. So fourth, seizing opportunities. So getting involved in extra things outside your job can also be a really nice, refreshing change from the typical learning that you're exposed to on a daily basis. So on a more personal note, I recently took on an opportunity with Sales Confidence, as James mentioned earlier. I'm not sure if you heard that, but when they needed an extra hand. And along the way, I've been able to learn so much, which has really fueled the start of my career as a founding SDR. And I've also been able to network and meet so many new great people. So for example, for you guys, even coming here today and seizing the opportunity to potentially stay after and network is a really great way to meet not only new people, but also learn from others who are like-minded and essentially are our community of people and SDRs. And finally, enjoyment. So very cringe, very, very cliche. I'm aware. But I do think that recognizing ways in which you enjoy learning is so, so important. It's really simple, right? If you're not enjoying it, you're not maximizing being effective. But if you're really into it, and if you're enthused and happy whilst learning, you're so much more likely to retain that information. So to summarize, the 5 main points that have really helped me are learning channels, learning styles, time allocation, seizing opportunities, and simply enjoying it. And don't feel pressured to do what everybody else is doing. Just go at your own pace, have your own style, and do what works for you. But that's everything. So James or Jack or Elaine, over to you.